All right, welcome in everyone. UGA football live on a Friday coming at you. JC Shelton, that is former Georgia tight end Arthur Lynch. Happy to be back with you here, Artie. It's been a little while. I know we had some scheduling difficulties as things go, but listen, it's a bye week. That can happen in the bye. That's fine. Artie, we're all good, man. We have a big game coming up next week, Georgia, Alabama. First top 5 matchup of the season in college football. The biggest matchup thus far in the young college football season. Artie, first off, how are you, man? And
I'm good.
secondly, what are you feeling like here going into a bye?
To be honest, I didn't even know it was a buy until one of my classmates is a fellow. Shout out Carson Turner. He is a 2021 graduate of our beloved university, University of Georgia, and we were talking about where we were going to watch the game. And he and I are both pretty busy, and then we kind of checked our phones. And we were like, "Oh snap, Georgia doesn't play until next weekend." So we were glad to see that we had a buy. To be honest, I don't really think they need it. I think having a bye this early in the season can actually be detrimental to a team, in my opinion,
Ooh, I want to hear
because
about that, Artie. I want to hear about that.
they played 3 games. One, Clemson was obviously a solid opponent. Kentucky played them very tough. Um, I guess there's 2 ways to look at it. I think that you could be like, okay, well, Kentucky, we didn't play great. We have a lot of things to correct. Um, and a bye week, you can correct those things. But to be completely frank, I think as a player, I'd rather just go back out and get another shot at another team right away. But typically, bye weeks, historically for Georgia, have come the week before the Florida game. I don't know if the season has gotten longer, if we just now have an extra week in the year or what, but maybe they have 2 bye weeks this year. I don't believe that they do. So yeah, I don't know. Personally, I don't. I will be interested to see how it goes.
Yeah, no, I think it's a new SEC schedule, right? Going away with and making the changes they did, the big changes, and no more divisions, top 2 teams in conference standings playing the championship, which has become a real. I just read a really interesting tweet from College Football Nerds who does some good stuff with numbers and stuff and
Mhm.
such. If you're interested in those things, and it was right before I got on it, so I've even processed it myself really. But it's talking about the challenges of the strength of schedule kind of biting the SEC a little bit, where there's a real chance you have like teams like Georgia and Texas who have beaten teams like Missouri and Ole Miss, but those teams get in because of the strength of schedule, which is looking really, really good for Ole Miss and Missouri specifically.
Mhm.
Um, and that's just kind of the scheduling thing. But I think the only advantage, I think there's really 2 advantages for me already, and so I guess we're differing opinion a little bit here. But I'm sure you agree with me on maybe the injury side of things for Georgia along the defensive line, and that's where Kentucky got a lot of push last week was inside. And Warren Brinson and Michael Williams were of course out of that game. Jordan Hall, also a former 5-star recruit, a sophomore, he missed that game as well. And those guys are probable going into next week. So that could be a big boost, right? And that Georgia defensive line with those added bodies, which Georgia, we all know this, Kirby Smart in that defense and Trey Scott, Glenn Schumann, they're really built around rotating those guys up front
Mhm.
to keep fresh bodies, right? And I think that's why 42 regular season wins in a row, it's a big part of that, right? Going on the road in SEC, having some tight games. Already, I was saying it in our instant reactions on Saturday night late that you look at those national championship seasons and you look at that scare at Missouri, right? And even, last year, the scares at Auburn and Carolina at home, you know, fans kind of had the same reaction to it, in my opinion, just kind of judging off the voice of the Georgia fan base after that game. He was kind of up in arms. Our run defense, our defensive line was getting pushed off the ball. Our linebackers didn't play well, weren't tackling well at the end of the game. Offensive line whiffing on blocks and such, and it's almost like a recipe for a scare like that. And we talked about that a lot already with the whole 7:30
Mhm.
kick first time. And I think that all played a part of it. Kind of seems like it did. We won't know for sure, obviously. And hindsight is 2020 on certain things, but I think that all kind of plays into what you can expect maybe in the next week. Is I think it's a real possibility that Georgia plays a lot better. You give Kirby Smart and a head coach like he is another week to prepare, and you pair that with the injury situation. I kind of like it for Georgia a little bit here And, on the other side, though, Artie, which is really interesting, is Alabama's on a bye too, right? So you give Kalen DeBoer and that really talented staff. Now, I know they're unproven in the SEC right now, but, let's check back at the end of the season. But, really talented staff have been, winners where they've been. So it's kind of interesting when you think about those two teams, a top 5 matchup, and both are on a bye this week. What are they going to show up with a little differently? What are they going to do to prepare a little differently? Because I think that's that type of game where you have pretty, Georgia fans might not agree with this, with not a big talent gap here at all, if there is any, between these two. So how does those little adjustments, and in my mind, I think that could be a real change for this game for, one or both programs, what they come out with offensively and defensively. It's a lot to say that I think Georgia might be better off here coming off bye. I guess that's what I'm getting at.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't disagree. I just think that, coming this early in the season, I think it's a little bit out of the ordinary. And I just don't know. Yeah, I never had a bye week this early in the season myself as a player. And I always liked the idea of getting it, around mid-season, leading up to the Florida game or the week before, playing, having a bye week, then playing one game, then playing the Florida game. And those are the only two scenarios I ever had a bye. And I just liked having that like halfway through the season.
Yeah. And Georgia will get that. They'll get that bye ahead of Florida again this year.
See, I'm surprised by that. But all right, moot point. Moving on, because like I don't understand. I don't understand the math of how they now have 2 bye weeks, and their first game was effectively Labor Day weekend. But maybe they're pushing back the SEC championship game. That's how it's going to work. So
I believe you're right there. I'd look it up, but I believe you're right. Let's get to this. Let's get your reaction on this, Artie. UGA drops to number 2 in the AP poll. Texas is crowned number 1. I'll let you go first here. I'm just coming off a big tangent about bye weeks.
Yeah. I mean, Texas deserves it. They're up to this point in the football season, they have the most impressive track record. They beat the defending national champs, whatever you think of them. Now, that might be a different viewpoint of Michigan win at the end of the season, depending how Michigan's season goes. I don't think it's going to go great. So we can litigate that at the end of the year. But, they beat up an in-state school this past week with their backup quarterback. Yes, that backup quarterback is Arch Manning, but he looked pretty damn good. And we struggled on the road against a Kentucky team that, to be frank, is not very good. And so, yeah, I think it's completely fine. I think rankings mean nothing during the season. So it's kind of like a moot point to have, to talk about it like, super in the weeds. But I think if you're just looking at it, if people are mad that we're not number 1, it's like your bias is blinding you, because Georgia's not the number 1 football team in the country right now. There's really no other way to put it.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I think Georgia fans should have a better idea of this than anyone, considering the college football playoff debacle last year when they were the first team ever to go from number 1, drop out of the top 4 in the last week of the season.
Yeah, totally.
First ever, not even considering that it was a 3-point loss, neutral field, Alabama and Nick Saban. Doesn't even matter. They were still the first team to do that. So that tells you right there, rankings do not matter until the final time that the playoff committee comes on, the ESPN 8-hour long show to tell you who the top teams are. That's what it's going to make. And how do you, what is your job? Your job's on the field, right? To win these games. And there's more opportunities this year, right? Georgia's going to be, I don't think they're going to undefeated. Alabama, I think one of these games, or it's going to be Alabama or it's going to be Texas. I don't think it's both. I think one of these is going to be a loss for Georgia. And I'm leaning Texas. And to your point, they have looked the best. They put the best product out on the field, and that is with 2 different quarterbacks. Now, you mentioned Michigan, the quality of competition. We don't have a really good idea of that. We know from what we've seen from Michigan that the offensive woes, I'll call them, benching their starting quarterback now, that tells you they already had issues going into the season with that, right? They were trying to play that out and see what happens. It hasn't worked out. You can argue that Kentucky going on the road and playing that team is a better win, but we can't say that right now because they're defending national champions. They're still number 18. All right. So that's how the strength of schedule and record is determined. But Texas, they've also completely dominated inferior teams beyond Michigan. And like you
Totally.
said, with Arch Manning coming in, and he's uber talented, obviously, and you witnessed that. But I think I can't remember who made this point, but it got me looking into it more, and I tend to agree with it. Is Texas has been really impressive up front on both sides of the ball, defensively and offensively. Offensive line, especially, Artie, and you can even speak to this. I think you might agree. Is how does a backup quarterback come in and keep that offense rolling like nothing is missing, even though you're missing a Heisman Trophy contender in Quinn Ewers? Is that offensive line is really good, and they know what they're doing. They're aiding the quarterbacks, maybe taking something off their plate as far as protections go, what have you. Because there is a big drop off in a junior like Ewers and then Manning as far as pre-snap checks and getting the right protection. That's just what I'm thinking. I think that might be one of the barometers for success for Texas in a long season is if you can keep that offensive line together. And like four of them have played a bunch of snaps. I can't remember the number, but it's a lot. So they have a lot of cohesiveness up front.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, when you look at when you're trying to diagnose or assess where a program is at in terms of like how good of a program that it currently is at, right? And when we're looking at Texas, I don't care how good or how highly rated of a quarterback or what his name is, the fact that he was able to come in and play at such a high level, and I didn't even know he was in the game. Like I was watching the highlights of that game, and like I just thought it was like I had to do a double take because I was like, oh, that's Texas being Texas with yours. And then obviously I was like, why are they showing all these like these like highlights from the Texas game? And I was like, oh, that's Arch Manning. Right. And then I did a quick Google. I was like, oh, like Quinn Ewers is hurt, blah, blah, blah. And what that tells me is Sark has this program humming, right? Where a guy who's as important to the program, to the team as Quinn Ewers can go down, and the next guy up, who happens to be a 5-star, but that is a representation of the program that he has built there, that he's able to convince 5-star quarterbacks to sit behind another 5-star quarterback, right? That shows me that Texas is Texas back? Maybe. Who knows? But it does tell me that Sark, who I've always thought highly of as a coach, as an offensive play caller, has built a program there, right? And they have depth. They have made it to the college football playoff last year. They beat Alabama on the road in Tuscaloosa last year against a great Alabama team, which we saw firsthand. So I just think that and this kind of piggybacks on what I was saying earlier about them being the number one team in the country. But I just think, to what your point is, if we're looking at Georgia's next couple of games, and if we think they slip up, it wouldn't shock me if they lose to Texas. It wouldn't shock me if they beat Texas. Like I think, and Kirby talked about this, and we can get into the game of Kentucky here in a sec. And I'll finish my thought on Texas. But like, I just think that right now, that team is bought in to one another, and they've bought into the program at Texas, which is a testament to Sark, because it's like, let's be very honest. Some coaches have like tasted a little bit of bringing Texas back, right? The Sugar Bowl a couple years ago with Herman, but Herman fell hard and fast after that Sugar Bowl, right? Yeah. And it seems that Sark has been able to build up this thing, and it looks like it's built to sustain. But
yeah,
luckily for us, we'll find out firsthand in 3 weeks.
Yeah, that's the interesting part, Artie. It's like we can talk for hours 3 weeks into the season, but it really doesn't matter if you can't keep it up, right?
Totally.
So we'll put Texas up there. We both agree. I think we should be number one, but let's see what you do against the big boys. And they haven't faced, especially up front, much competition. We thought that might be Michigan, but didn't turn out that way. You could just tell by their play alone. I don't think it was just Texas so much overpowering them. You wanted to talk about Georgia, Kentucky for a second, and I talked about it at length last week. So I'll let you take the mantle here if you want. I'll just say, I think a lot of things played into that, but you can clearly see maybe they were, as a team, a little rocked when Kentucky came out strong as far as offensive line and defensive line, and those guys were getting pushed around a little bit. Now, that Georgia defense played a lot better than people are giving credit for,
Totally.
Especially the second half getting off the field, which was a struggle earlier in that game, right? Kentucky was putting out long drives. Now, red zone defense, Georgia locked it down, played like you want to see there. But long drives, and Georgia's usually so good to get off the field. So it was like, okay, something's a little amiss here because we knew the offensive firepower they had wasn't there. Brock Vandagriff was running for his life, but making plays on the run too. So I think it was a lot of things, penalties too. Like you saw a lot of those things we talked about already going into that game, like these young guys, playing at night, first road game, first not only road game, but SEC game. And it kind of seems like all those kind of played out in that way. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a little different take on it, right? I think first, we don't play well in Kentucky. We never have. We just don't. When I was there, we struggled with Kentucky on the road. I think we beat them like 38-31 or 38-35, but it was really a four-quarter game. You even go back to the I think it was like 2008. Matt Stafford, I think, had to like throw a game-winning touchdown to beat them, right? We historically, from a win-loss perspective, have a great record against Kentucky. We usually whoop them up pretty good at home, but for whatever reason, we have a tough time asserting our top tier potential or whatever, right? Or football in Kentucky. But to talk about what I believe went down is I think we have to give credit where credit is due to Brock Vandagriff, right? He is a 5-star quarterback for a reason. He's athletic, he's big, right? He's able to make some plays with his legs. I mean, his offensive line must hate him or they must be bad because my God, right? Like he would take a 2-step drop and then he'd be running for his life. That's a testament to our defense, no doubt. But I think like if our defense did not play as good as they did, we'd be singing a different tune than we are right now. So anyone who's kind of attacking the defense probably doesn't know football as much as they think that they do. But I will say this. I heard a lot of stuff about Bobo and a lot of stuff about the offense. I just think it really comes down is like we haven't really identified who our playmakers are. We've identified that we have a great quarterback who could distribute the ball. He had an unbelievable throw. I think it was like in the fourth quarter or maybe third quarter.
Talking about the play action to Dominic Lovett that really flipped the field and kind of sealed it for Georgia.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, that game won the throw. That throw won the game, no question. And like that was like that was like such a big time throw. Like that's why he's an NFL prospect, right? But I just think like collectively, I don't think we've found like our guy yet, right? We were very spoiled to have Brock Bowers, who was like, I like to claim him as the tight end, but he was so much more than a tight end. Like he was such a dominant, like, hey, gotta have it type guy. And when I say gotta have it, right? Like when you're doing like third and medium or third and long, it's like, hey, these are our gotta have it plays, right? We would say that in the NFL, in college all the time. Like, here's the plays on third and medium and short and long that we like when we gotta have it, right? We gotta convert, we gotta get a big play. Like, hey, gotta have it, gotta have it. And like sometimes you can use that phrase to define a player, right? Like, who's that gotta have it type player? Like when you need a play, who do you go to, right? When I was in school, we had two guys like that, AJ Green, and then we had Todd Gurley, right? And those guys don't come around often. And obviously, they don't have to be as successful in the NFL to be a gotta have it guy, right? But I think for Georgia right now, and this is like a, almost like not a challenge, right? But like I'm just eager to see who is going to step up from a playmaker perspective. Because like you got to have a guy when it's like 3rd and 8. He's telling Beck, like, give me the ball. Like I will get open, I will make a play. And I don't know. Will it be a tight end? I don't know. Will it be a running back? I don't know. Like I think there's plenty of guys who are talented enough to step up and be that gotta have it guy, right? But I don't think he's emerged yet, right? And it's weird because like a quarterback can't really be the gotta have it guy unless he's like a Lamar Jackson who can
Yeah, Jaden
like
Daniels, kind of like
yeah,
that.
but like when you're like a true pocket passer and it's like you're like, no man, I'm a facilitator. Like I got to get this ball and like I got to sling it across the field.
Yeah.
I don't think we have a guy that stepped up yet. I think someone will emerge, but I don't know who. Does that make sense?
It does, dude. I'm with you. I think from a wide receiver perspective, let's just say receiver in general, tight ends included, I'm with you, right? We've seen potential. We've seen big plays. Think back to the Clemson game when we were trying to, put our foot on their throats, and we had some big time third downs, sometimes to really seal that game in a dominant fashion. You think of that catch across the middle by London Humphreys. You think of that big
Totally.
touchdown by Colby Young, Dominic Lovett just kind of consistently being there. But when it comes to, like you said, third and long, gotta have a guy. I kind of like that. I might adopt that. Already gotta
Gotta
have a
have
guy.
him.
Who's your gotta habits? I think Dom, he's shown he can be that guy, but I feel like, maybe that moment hasn't come for him consistently. Now, I will say, I think we do have one at running back in Trevor Etienne. And
Yeah.
Kirby Smart doubled down on this. I was thinking about it going into that press conference, and he did, which was the runs that he had when he was getting hit behind the line of scrimmage, or those holes were completely covered up. Georgia blocked, the same guy when they had a free rusher somehow. Micah Morris came in for Tate Ratledge. That could be a part of that. Now, I think Micah, that's something to watch as we go next week. Now, he's played a lot of snaps. He's really talented. Only good things from the coaching staff and the times he's come in. But he did miss some against Kentucky. I think with another 2 weeks to prepare of him, hey, you're the guy now, right guard. That might change some things for him. So I think he has that potential. But the job that Trevor Etienne did, getting back to line of scrimmage or getting at least 2 or 3 yards at times, making guys miss, especially in the end of the third, fourth quarter, I think he kind of showed you is that guy to have his guy when it comes from running back, but receiver, I think it remains to be seen. And last thing I'll say already too is Carson Beck has been so good against zone coverage in his career, right? He is not afraid to take you for 8 yards, take you for 6 yards, maybe when that occasional opens up down the seam for 20 and such, throwing it in between defenders, throwing it underneath when a defender's playing over top for a good gain and a first down, keeping the drive moving. He's always been so good at that. But against Kentucky, and you watch back at the film, and there's those guys running open. So it was like, what were they doing? And I'm not a coach enough to know this. What were they doing, Kentucky wise, maybe pre-snap or even post, that were kind of getting him off his spot, because he would at times drift into the side of the pocket that's getting crushed in, rather than just stay in the middle because he had a perfect pocket. Things like that. Maybe he was just a little rattled from what he was seeing from Kentucky. Now, he
Mhm.
didn't turn the ball over, right? And he made that throw, so
Mhm.
he did enough to win the game. But that was kind of, I would say, concerning, but interesting to me to see. But
Yeah, look, I'm not absolving him of all responsibility. I mean, he's the guy, and I think he did it. He said all the right things in the press conferences after. Kirby said all the right things. They're going to get back in the lab. They're going to do what they're supposed to do. They're going to correct what they're supposed to correct. And and he needs to play better. There's no doubt. Coach Bobo needs to coach better. Coach Kirby, or Coach Smart needs to get his guy, get the score. Like I get all that, but at the same time, it's like it's a team game. It just is. It's the greatest team game and ultimate team sport in the world. And I just think like they were so lucky to have a guy like Brock Bowers for 3 years, where I think just kind of knowing how teammates look at those gotta have it guys, where it's like, man, like we have a guy that could bail us out no matter what. And when you have that like insurance policy almost, and I'm probably explaining this like poorly, but it's just like other guys just are like, I'll make my plays, I'll do my thing, but like I just I know Brock's got me, right? And I know Brock's gonna step up and get this 3rd and 6 and take the big hit or break the tackle and go for 60. And someone needs to pick there is a void right now in our offense that is left behind by a 2-time winning Mackey Award winner, right? A 3-time All-American, a first round pick. That void needs to be filled by somebody. Maybe it's ETN. Maybe it's, but I don't know who it's going to be, but it's got to be someone, and someone needs to step up and become an alpha in that room other than Carson Beck.
Yeah.
And when I
And
say
there's
room,
good,
I mean offensive room, not obviously like a specific position room.
yeah, no, I like that. I like that a lot. And, next week is the time to do it too. National
100%.
stage, because
100%.
and you talked into the team dynamic there a little bit. I like that because, and that makes sense. And I totally agree with you. As a teammate looking at a guy having ultimate trust, it makes you play better subconsciously, and it keeps you from getting rattled subconsciously, right? Having that guy like that. And you mentioned two Georgia greats for you. And Brock, of course, was that guy. And I think there's an opportunity next week to really take that. I mean, how much more trust would you gain in a teammate if he goes off against number 4 Alabama in Bryant-Denny
No
Stadium
question.
and just dominates? I mean, that'd be
Hey,
incredible.
career defining, no doubt.
Absolutely, yeah. ABC 7:30. No, I mean that's going to be a great environment.
And also, those guys can exist on defense too now, right? Like Jarvis Jones, like we knew when we needed a play to happen and it was 3rd and 5 or 3rd and 6 or something, we needed a turnover, we needed a sack, we need to get the ball back. I was like, oh, I was like 29 is going to get it done. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that security blanket, that confidence, that it's hard to explain, but it adds such a different dynamic to a football team. You and I talked about Brock last year, about this very thing, but when he was on the team, obviously, and it's just it fundamentally changes how you approach football games. That's just a fact.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think defensively you have that with Malachi Starks as the ultimate security blanket because he does play
Totally.
safety. And then you have Jaylen Walker, who has just been a madman in the pass rush. I love how they're using him. Now, it's kind of a subtle thing to watch during a football game, especially if you're a Georgia fan watching that, heart-wrenching kind of game, and you might have missed it. But I know a lot of you didn't because I saw the uproar on Twitter after. But Jaylen Walker had an amazing game rushing the passer. Now, he didn't get a sack, but he had like 8 pressures, the most in college football, in all of college football last week. And the way they're using him inside and outside, he provides a lot of problems. I saw NFL scouts talking about him, reviewing his film. Right, he might have made some money last week, especially if he can build on that this season.
Yep.
So he might even be that type of guy, which really haven't seen in his career up until this year. And I know it's just a 3-game sample size, but I'm definitely gonna be watching out for him and see how Georgia moves him around, especially against a scrambling quarterback like Jalen Milroe. And if you haven't watched Alabama's slate yet, and it hasn't been, South Florida in week 2 is interesting because that was a tight game, and Alabama allowed 200 yards rushing to South Florida in Bryant-Denny when Nick Sabin and his field was getting honored that day. Western Kentucky 63-0. They ended up pulling away from South Florida when they put their injured tackle back in the game, and it's not Proctor, it's the other one. His name slips me. Basically held him out to get him healthy, but had to put him back in the fourth, 28-0 in the fourth quarter, and pulled away 42-16. So, and then Wisconsin last week, 42-10. Wisconsin's quarterback Van Dyke goes out with an ACL tear. It was kind of a different game after that moment. Although Alabama was controlling the game, it was a different game after 42-10 there. So we don't really know much about Alabama, already in my opinion, just from based on who they played. But we know the guys that they have returning that we're familiar with, and ultimate is Jalen Milroe. He's played well. I mean, he's playing like the star he is. He loves the deep ball, still loves it. Ryan Williams, the freshman 5-star phenom wide receiver, is playing really, really well, right? The competition at defensive back hasn't been near what he'll face here against Georgia and the top teams on their schedule. So we'll find out more about him, but he does lead the team in receptions. He is that long threat. Pairing those two together, Milroe and Williams, is a problem to take the top of off of the defense. Mm-hmm. Something Georgia's going to have to face. Rushing wise, it's really, and this guy's name is awesome. Jam Miller, Jam. That's an all-time name team right there. Props to that kid. All right. He's leading the team in rushing. It's a really hard offense to face, Arthur, even with a new system and what DeBoer's brought over. And it doesn't seem like it's the same system as he ran And Washington, which makes sense if you're a good coach, which we think DeBoer is, why would you put your system and make the existing players, which might be one of the best quarterback? Well, it is one of the best quarterbacks in college football. Why would you make him adapt? Try to find out what he does well and help him out there and overall help your team out. So I think, just the players alone and what Miller can do outside, takes a defender away, a lot of challenges, right? In Georgia, he definitely slipped away from Georgia in the SEC championship game way too many times for what Kirby Smart would want. I think offensive line is kind of the question there. Like I said, they were in a big battle with South Florida until they got some cohesiveness back in there, right? So I don't think that group is as good as they're going to be. They've had injuries to both tackles. Proctor, I think, is expected to go in this game, former 5-star. Defensive line, like I said, kind of the same with that 200 yards allowed to South Florida. That was weird. So nobody's proven yet, but we know the guys they have there. I think this is a huge coaching battle to me, Arthur. A huge coaching battle, right? And I think Georgia's going to be benefited with having Mykel Williams and Warren Brinson back. If they are, they're looking that way. Jordan Hall is probably going to miss. We'll have him as doubtful here with that stress fracture in both legs. They don't take a lot of time to recover, but it is something to watch out for because Georgia does not push guys back. Roger Robinson, he's doubtful for that toe. Tate Ratledge, he's going to be out until Florida, which is big. It is big. I know Georgia loves to rotate guys, and there is some cohesiveness there because of the amount of snaps that they let offensive linemen come in and play on a weekly basis. So I don't think it's a huge issue and maybe not as a big as an issue as it would be with other teams. But, that's a first-round pick at right guard out for 6 weeks with an ankle, got a tightrope surgery, which is the same thing that Amarius Mims, Brock Bowers had last year. He also had a sprained MCL. Xavier Michelad, which played a lot of snaps on the defensive line. That was his first game of the year at Kentucky. I think he played well, all things considered. Even though that group really just got gassed because we didn't have the bodies that Georgia's used to having, I should say. Something to watch, right? To get these guys back could be a different group up there, especially from a stamina standpoint. And Bama's going to want to run the ball. And especially think, Artie, here's the thing, because Nick Saban has an office in Bryant-Denny Stadium, right? And he has, DeBoer has him on speed dial, baby, if that's still a thing. And what do you think that Saban's telling DeBoer about this game? It is run the ball, right? Because Saban, remember after the national championship, Saban was like, we were up 18-13 in the second half, and Georgia ran the ball down our throats and scored twice. That was kind of the difference of the game beyond just the pick six at the end. But both teams are going to want to run the heck out of the football. So it's going to be that type of game. I really think already the spread here is still Georgia's favored. Road dog, 2.5 points, which means if that was in Athens, it'd be 5.5 point line roughly.
Yeah.
It's a lot going into this one.
We can talk about Alabama more in detail next week, but
definitely. Yes, we will get more in depth there.
To the question of Saban, I don't know if he seeks out DeBoer. I think Saban's the type of guy where he takes a step, like when he says he takes a step back, he takes a step back. And he probably told us my phone is always my phone line, like you call me whenever. Now, whether or not DeBoer leans on that, and I probably would if I were DeBoer, because I think that's the greatest football. I think it's one of the greatest football coaches of all time. Just football, the game of football. Obviously, the greatest coach of all time in college. And I think the thing that makes him great, Saban, is his attention to detail and his competitive drive and his ability to be just disgusted and allergic to complacency, right? I think he passed that along to Kirby, or he identified those similar traits in Kirby, which is why he brought Kirby along. I don't know DeBoer well enough to speak to his personality, but I do think he's a really smart football coach. And I think he did a lot with not a lot at Washington, right? Like, I know he had some good receivers here or there, but let's be honest, like talent-wise, that roster it was a good roster. wasn't
Mhm.
what we see in the SEC. I am very curious to see how he approaches this game, right?
Mhm.
Um, and I'm kind of interested to see how like Kirby approaches it as well, because I think some of the things that like got Kirby going when they played Alabama was the fact that it was Sabin. You know what I mean? And I'm not saying that Kirby's going to take it lightly or this and that, but I just think that like there is that dynamic. You know what I mean? Like teacher, student, mentor, mentee, master, say whatever you want to talk about, right? So I think we're going to try to run the ball a lot early in that game. Um, but defensively, it's going to be a challenge for us because I think Milrow, like I think DeBoer is a really good coach in terms of like offensive, from an offensive perspective, putting his team in a position to attack defenses downfield and not be afraid of really talented defenses. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
And so it'll be interesting. We'll talk more about it next week. I don't know if he's going to call Saban or not. I really don't.
No,
Um,
I think DeBoer would reach out to him. I didn't word that way, but I think that's how it's going to be.
yeah, no, but I have no doubt that
And that's what you said
Saban,
too. But
yeah, I have no doubt that Saban would be like, yeah, call me whenever. But
Mhm.
it's like, I think, because you're also thinking about these coaches all have freaking massive egos, dude. All of them.
No, no, man. What are you talking about?
You kind of have to. So it's like, part of me is probably like, in his mind, he's like, I got to do this my own way. Like, I can't, you know what I mean? And I know nothing about DeBoer. So it's like,
Mm.
but I think that's such an issue. Like, I didn't even think about that. Is he going to call Saban? Um, but if I were Georgia, I'd be like, we got to let's just run the ball down the throat and keep the ball out of Milrow's hands and try to take that crowd out of it, because Bryant Denny Stadium is not an easy place to play a football game.
No. And I know they leave early. That's their thing. They're not going to leave early against Georgia. That's not going to be the case whatsoever.
No,
If you, especially if you can afford $3,000 tickets.
yeah. I think
Yeah,
it's gonna be a
no,
good game. I don't think it's
dude,
gonna be a blowout. I think it's gonna be a great game.
I don't think it's a blowout either way whatsoever, dude. Because you think, I mean, you put Milrow in a position. Hey, we're down 10. We need it. He's
Yeah.
going to get 7 at least. You know what I
So
mean?
see, like he's like a quarterback who could be a gotta have it guy because he can run,
Because his
right?
legs, dude. And it's not just he can run; it's a running back. He's
No,
he's quick. I wonder
dude,
what he runs in his 40. It's like probably a
that's
4.
a linebacker
Oh yeah,
back.
linebacker body who can run. That's
Yeah.
dude.
And and
It's going to be an
and
amazing game.
and so I'm definitely fired up, but I think an underrated storyline, and again, we will go into further detail about the entire game, it is the coaching aspect.
Mhm.
Because it's like this is the first real football game for University of Alabama. When I say real football game, I mean like SEC, our nuts are on the line, right? Let's see what you got. This is the first game without Nick Saban since 2006. Dude, that's insane.
That is, dude. And I was thinking about that a lot earlier today and how the difference is. And I think that's what we'll save for next week
Yeah,
because we
yeah,
can sit
yeah.
here for 3 hours. So we'll
No
give you
doubt.
some good stuff next week, absolutely, and talk about the different storylines and how they relate. Um, Artie, let's pick some games. Let's pick some
Yeah,
games
so
for week 4. We got a good slate. If you're a college football fan overall, not just a Georgia fan, a good slate tomorrow. Illinois, who beat Kansas, they're
mhm.
ranked for the first time in I can't remember how many years. It's been a long time. Beat Kansas. They're at Nebraska and the Fighting Dylan Raiolas and Matt Rules.
Mhm.
Really interesting game. Nebraska's -9 here, at 9 points at home, but Illinois and that Britt Bielema? Is he still at Illinois?
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
pretty sure.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So
Yeah.
that kind of makes sense.
No,
They like to
but
run the
it's him.
rock.
It's him for sure.
Yeah. So they can run the rock here. It'll be an interesting game, dude. I think right now, and Nebraska's only been on the up and up. This might be kind of a little bit of wake up call. I think they win this game, but I think it's a little bit of a wake up call to an Illinois team who's, this will be a massive win. They didn't even make a bowl last year, right? So I think this is going to be one of those
No.
hype games. Tough place to play, but Illinois keeps it within a touchdown.
Yeah, I like that as well. I think I'm a fan of Illinois because I like Brett Bielema. I know he didn't have the greatest run at Arkansas. He should have never left Wisconsin. That's a different story for a different day. Uh, but the one thing that Brett Bielema does well is he runs the football, and they play very, 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 very good defense. Like that's his MO. That's what they do. It's like, hey, we're gonna play shutdown defense. We're gonna pressure you. We might play some man. We're gonna try to rattle the quarterback, but we're gonna be physical as hell. And then we're gonna get the ball. And it might not be pretty. It might be a lot of play. It might look like it's 2005 out there, but we're gonna run the rock. We're gonna maul you up front. And Dylan Raiola has played very well against inferior competition thus far, but he's a true freshman nonetheless. So it's like you got to give credit where credit is due. There's a reason why he was one of the top quarterbacks in the country, if not the top guy. There's a reason why Georgia was super excited to get him. And there was a reason why Georgia was super salty when he left. So I do think that he might have some trouble against this defense, but I think ultimately Nebraska will probably win the game because they're home. I think it's going to be very close. So I like taking Illinois as well.
Good pick. Good pick. Let's go USC at Michigan. So USC, first year in the Big Ten. Big win against LSU. Open the season. Already up to number 11 in the country. They look like already all of a sudden Lincoln Riley has a defense, right? They haven't played any really, really good offenses yet. LSU has been struggling in that facet, even though I think they'll get a lot better here with Garrett Nussmeier eventually. USC at Michigan here, we already kind of downplayed Michigan as they deserve. It's just what they put on the field. Starting a new quarterback in Orji, who was projected to be the starter the entire offseason until they started a former walk-on senior, and he's thrown 6 picks to 2 touchdowns. And his 4th pick last week was when they made the call. Finally, I think USC wins this game. I think it 7 points, right? I mean, proven quarterback who's waited his turn, kind of like a lot like Carson Beck. Waited his turn, knows the offense. Lincoln Riley is a quarterback guru. We all know this. It pays off for him. The defense is better. I think they go into Michigan and win by more than a touchdown, or at least a touchdown.
I'm with you. I actually think this might be it's not going to break the back of Michigan, but I think this is going to be a game where Michigan is going to have to look in the mirror after and be like, what's going on? Because I do think USC's defense is improved. I know the bar was incredibly low for that program's defense, but an improved defense when you know that you're going to have an elite quarterback under center who can throw the ball across the yard, all you need is a decent defense. You don't need a great defense. And so I think that they're at least decent and they could be good. And I'm with you on USC's quarterback and Lincoln Riley, right? Like I think he's going to spin it. He's going to go into Michigan. I think they're going to win big. What big is, I don't know. I think they're going to cover the spread for sure, but I think they could win by like 17, 21 points. Like I don't think Michigan is good, like at all. And we'll see, but that's my prediction on that one.
Cool. Yeah, and this is JC versus Artie Pick'em. Arthur Lynch has had my number thus far. Yeah. He's 10-5. I'm 8-7.
Next question.
Yeah, Georgia Tech at Louisville. Louisville getting 10 points at home. I think this line already is reflective of Georgia Tech's performance versus Syracuse. They were really outmatched there. And especially, defensive side of the ball, a lot of passing yards to Mr. McCord and company. This is a weird game. I think this is kind of a get-back game for Brent Key. I think this might be where good coaching really helps his team out to stay competitive in this. I like Jeff Brom in Louisville and what he's done. Offensively, they're not tremendous, but they do play well in the line of scrimmage for an ACC team, and defensively as a whole. I don't know, man. I kind of like Tech to keep it a little closer than 10. That's a tough one. I put this one in here knowing it was going to be a tough one.
Yeah, I like Brom a lot. Like, I think he's a really good coach. But I could say the same exact thing for Georgia Tech. I
think the programs are kind of in different places a little bit, right? Georgia Tech's still looking for that, I think, an identity overall, right? And then Louisville and Braun, they've had a little bit more time to work with that. Obviously, last year in the ACC championship, got to that game.
Let me check who Louisville's played thus far. I'm on.
Yeah, Artie's been learning to read, folks. So we had to slide him this card late. It's all a part of my plan to really take over the lead here. I think that's what it is. And I'll say that. I have no bones in saying that.
Very good. Whatever you got to say. Georgia State, VMI, they got back on track.
Shout out Georgia State.
Yeah. Okay. So, yeah. I'm going to take Georgia Tech as well. I think it'll be a close game, even though, I think it'll be a close game. So I know I was going to try to deviate from you, but I think they got back on track last week against VMI. No one knew they had a football team, but they only lost to Syracuse by 3 on the road. I think Georgia Tech's a good football team. I think they'll keep it close against Louisville.
I like it, man. That offense just gives a lot of problems. Props to Syracuse for playing so well against that. But 2 more picks and we'll get out of here. Utah getting 1 point at OK State. Now and let me give you a little precursor to this, Artie, real quick. The Big 12 it's the most competitive conference for a couple of reasons here. There's a bunch of mid-ranked teams fighting for that Big 12 spot in the playoff, right? And there's a real chance that they will beat up on themselves so much that only one team will get in, despite, all these ranked contenders. OK State plays Kansas State next week, right? And Utah comes to town. Cam Rising, questionable. Is he going to be able to play? And that news it could have come as we jumped on here. But at OK State, obviously we talked about Mike Gundy before. Offensively, run the ball. They put up points. They're going to put up points. Defensively is where they have some holes. That's going to be a tough place to play for Utah here, man. I think that this line kind of screams OK State to win in my mind.
Yeah, I'm with you. I like OK State. I do like Utah because Whittingham's a great defensive coach, and I mean, if you look at the job that he's done over the course of his career, it's incredible. I mean, they've navigated, I think, like 3 conferences under his watch. I think he started in Mountain West, then went to Pac-12, and now they're in Big 12. And he will probably have he'll have 3 separate coaches of the year in 3 different conferences, all for the same team. That's probably a record somewhere in the college football, whatever. But I like OK State at home. I've played in that stadium. It's a weird place, dude. Oklahoma's a weird place. And
looks fun.
It is fun. No, it's such a cool atmosphere. It's only about 60 to 65,000, so it's not small, but it's not like SEC size stadiums. But it's hot. It's hot, and those fans get after it, and they're right on top of you. So like there's not much space. Like you go to Georgia game, you kind of got that like track right behind the wall, and then there's the hedges, and then there's a big sideline. So like if you're at ground level, the field looks pretty far away. You got about 8 to 10 feet from sideline, or I'd probably say 8 to 10 yards from sideline to stadium.
Wow.
Oh yeah, dude. They are on top of you. And it'll be interesting to see. Like I think the thing that makes me nervous, JC, about OK State is like they'll look dominant for like 4 weeks.
Yeah.
And then they'll just be like, we're not going to play football today. And so
this very well could be that moment. Yeah, you're right.
But I will say they usually play up to their competition and then play down to their competition. So I like OKC to be Utah at home. If this was at Utah, I would say Utah.
Yeah, I like that. Last game, Tennessee at Oklahoma. We've been the same through 4 already. Yeah. We might go perfect here.
Want me to go first in this one?
Yeah, let you go first. I think that might be part of it. Yeah, go ahead.
I like Tennessee to cover. I think Heupel has done a very good job. Now we'll see if he can go beat. I mean, he's beat Alabama at home, but we'll see how he fares against Georgia late in the year and some other people. But I think Oklahoma's good. I don't think they're great. I think Venables has not a long way to go. I think he's getting there. but I think Heupel is like, we're in year 4 now with him, maybe 5, and that quarterback they got is freaking good, man. He's a good player, and I hope it'll be a great test. I think it'll probably be close in the first half, but I think Tennessee comes out firing in the second half and they win by 14.
Yeah. I really want to go opposite of you right here, but I
Yeah.
can't. I just think here's the thing. If Oklahoma had shown more offensively this season, you can make a real case for a
Yeah.
chance to upset here or keep it within 3, something like that, maybe a 1-2 point game. Because defensively, Venables does have that background where we've seen him have championship caliber defenses. He's had a couple of seasons now to build that roster, and they look good on defense. But it's that offense. I mean, they scored 16 points versus Houston. They did put 34 up on Tulane. We know Tulane is a huge defensive program. Jackson Arnold on that offense hasn't been what we kind of pictured it to be. Maybe unfair expectations. Who knows? I think people were just kind of clamoring for Venables to get a good offense. It's almost the opposite of Lincoln Riley.
Yep, 100%.
If we had seen a little bit more, well, this could be, and it's early in the season, and that's why it's so really difficult predicting these games because they're early in the season. Teams can make such big jumps week to week if they're talented and have that coaching. Now, defensively, I think Oklahoma is going to give Tennessee some problems here, and a redshirt freshman in Nico. Tennessee has not played the competition, right? Neither has Oklahoma, but I think they haven't played the competition that they'll face in Oklahoma. Line of scrimmage, really important here. We know this, SEC, especially on the road for Tennessee. Tennessee has kind of an advantage there, I think. Offensive line's played really good, given Nico time to throw. They've run the ball well. I still hate the fact that they onside kicked Kent State up 30-0 in the first half. That is absolutely asinine, and you don't see championship programs doing that for a reason. Injuries, you want to get your young players on the field, such and such. Do it in the first kickoff, maybe not up 30. Anyways, I kind of off a tangent there. I like Tennessee here because the fast-paced offense is going to wear that defense down eventually, and because I don't think Oklahoma has the firepower they need on offense to really compete and put up enough points to get a dub here, I'm going to go Tennessee to cover. It could be one of those close ones, right? If Oklahoma's offense wakes up a little bit, and maybe that Tennessee defense, which here's the thing to watch for Tennessee this year, folks, especially before they play Georgia and come to Athens. That defensive secondary is very unproven. They're young. They're unproven. Now, up front 7, they're good. They're top, 5 in the SEC, top 6, 7, up in there in the top level of the SEC as far as front 7 goes. Back end, they're not. So who's going to test them? Is it going to be Oklahoma? Can they maybe do it? That's going to be one of those areas where you see Tennessee throughout the year maybe fold. If they're going to fold in any direction, it would be in the secondary there, and people taking advantage of them over the top, tearing up the zone, what have you. So that's something to watch here. But yeah, we'll go Tennessee, Artie, to cover that as well. So we're going to live and die together here this week in week 4. Going to be a good college football slate.
I love it, Coach.
We'll be back next week with a couple shows. Have a special guest. He's really good at breaking down quarterbacks next week. So we'll talk a little Carson Beck and Jalen Milroe. Stay tuned for that. Thank you for watching on X, Facebook, or YouTube at the Pulse Sports Network. Until next time, Artie will sign off.
Go Dogs.